Is it possible that Ferrari's star signing for 2025, Lewis Hamilton, is already questioning his decision? Today we reveal the harsh words of the British champion himself, his frustration after the GP of Spain, and how this self-criticism could be the beginning of a new narrative in his career. Are you really prepared for this challenge? Formula One does not forgive, and even less when it comes to someone like Lewis Hamilton. In the collective imaginary of the F1 fan, Hamilton's name does not only represent a pilot. It represents an era, a symbol of continuous excellence, of surgical precision under pressure, of pure molded talent for more than a decade of experience at the highest level. But that image, so firmly built at the top of the grille next to Mercedes, has been forced to confront a very different reality in 2025. Because Ferrari is not just another team. Ferrari is another culture, another rhythm, another way of understanding motoring. And what seemed like a new promising stage for the heptacampion of the world is revealing itself as a much more turbulent journey than any fanatic would have imagined. When Hamilton announced his signing by Ferrari, the vibro motoring community, it was a movement full of symbolism, almost poetic. The best pilot of his generation by joining the most mythical team in history. For many, it meant the last great crusade of a veteran warrior, an opportunity to close his career big, returning to the Scuderia to the top after years of frustrations. But the beginning of that story has not been the heroic fable that many projected. What has lived in the Spanish Grand Prix, the first of Hamilton with Ferrari in European lands, has been all glorious. From free training to the checkered flag, it was evident that something did not fit. The car did not respond to its commands with the agility to which it was accustomed. The balance in curve, the traction at exit, the sensation when braking. All those small elements that allow a pilot to flow with the car were out of place. And that, for someone like Hamilton, is not just frustrating. It is deeply destabilizing. Because beyond track performance, a pilot lives from his connection with the machine. When that connection does not exist, even the champions doubt themselves. But the most raw was his own evaluation. Hamilton did not blame the team or strategy or the changing climate of the GP. He looked in. And there, bluntly, he acknowledged that he thought the adaptation process would be shorter. He admitted that he underestimated the complexity of this Ferrari, who believed that his previous experience would allow him to take shortcuts in the learning curve. That sincerity in someone with his record is not common. And that vulnerability humanizes him, but also raises deep questions about what is to come. Ferrari, meanwhile, did not help. In a weekend where every second he had, the team showed some of the old ghosts again. Doubtful strategic decisions, unclear communication at key moments, and an execution that left its pilots exposed to avoidable errors. Hamilton, who had surpassed Albon at the exit, found himself back behind after poor intermediate tire management. And from there, his career became a kind of endless punishment between traffic, lack of rhythm, and a car that simply did not finish responding. This first block not only establishes the technical conflict, establishes human drama. Because what is at stake is not a victory more or less. What is at stake is the final narrative of one of the most iconic sport races. And now, more than ever, Hamilton knows that writing that last chapter with Ferrari will not be a matter of talent. It will be a matter of patience, work, and above all, of emotional resistance. Will it be able to overcome the challenge, or this beginning of 2025 is the sign that it has risen on board a train that will not take it where I expected? That is the question that begins to take place in everyone's mind. And perhaps also in his. Lewis Hamilton did not reach Ferrari as one more pilot. He arrived as a living legend with 7 world titles in the backpack and the reputation of having been able to convert every asphalt millimeter into an extension of his instinct. But in the technical universe of the modern Formula One, even the largest must start from scratch when they change their team. And that is precisely what Hamilton had to do. Because what he found in the SF25 was not a custom-made car, but a vehicle designed with other priorities, another type of feedback, and above all, another driving style completely different from the one he had refined for years in Mercedes. The first great technical obstacle was the way in which the Ferrari generates aerodynamic load in curve. While the Mercedes of previous years allowed Lewis an aggressive driving, with late braless and early traction at the exit of curve, the SF25 requires a more progressive entry, with less mass transfer and a higher minimum speed maintained in the middle of the curve. This feature favors the style of Charles Leclerc, who tends to release the accelerator before, position the car in advance and manage the curve passage more stable. Hamilton, on the other hand, has had to force himself to abandon many of his acquired habits, especially that style of stopping at the limit and looking for the apex late, because they simply do not work with this aerodynamic architecture. During the weekend in Spain, the adaptation process was visible but also painful. In the classification sessions, Hamilton was close to Leclerc in terms of times, but behind each fast lap there was a constant fight to adjust its approach. On a technical level, their feedback to the engineers indicated that he still did not feel confidence in the front train of the car. The feeling that the front axle did not bit as he needed to turn precisely in medium and fast curves was one that constantly repeated. For a pilot like him, whose historical strength has been his ability to manage curve entry and maximize traction at the exit, that lack of trust means being running against the car, not with him. In the race, difficulties were magnified by intermittent rain and strategic errors. Ferrari chose to keep it on the track with tires that had already overcome its performance peak, waiting for a climate window that did not arrive. In those laps, Hamilton not only wasting valuable time, but also forced to pilot with a car that no longer responded to his style or circuit conditions. It was a perfect scenario for mental and technical wear. It was not enough to adapt to a different car. It had to do it in the middle of a tactical chaos, with reduced visibility, with variable aerodynamic load, and without the full support of a structure that is still getting used to working with it. The self-criticism was immediate and without makeup. In statements after the GP, Hamilton admitted that he had been naive when he thought that he could accelerate his adaptation simply with experience and talent. He acknowledged that he had reached the project with the belief that understanding the car would be a matter of few sessions. But what he found was a machine with unpredictable behavior, with a setup that requires extremely fine adjustments, and with a sensitivity to balance that he had not experienced since his initial years in McLaren. That honesty, which for others could be perceived as weakness, actually shows Hamilton's true competitive character. You are not denying errors. You are facing them. But it also launches a message between the lines. If you want to compete at the level that is expected of it and the team, Ferrari must understand that it is not enough to have a good base. They need a technical development that not only corrects concept errors, but also aligns with their driving style. The key is not only in the simulator data or in the telemetry graphs. It is to rebuild a synergy that, for now, does not exist. And meanwhile, every minute of track is gold. Because at this level, a half-grade imbalance in the direction angle, or a small deviation in braking distribution, can make the difference between a podium and be out of the points. That is the technical reality that Hamilton faces. A reality that, with each passing race, becomes a fight not only against its rivals, but against the limitations of the car and the clock that does not stop. In Formula One, numbers and chronometers can count many things. But there is a dimension that time leaves cannot capture, the emotional. And that is where Lewis Hamilton's signing by Ferrari reaches a depth that transcends the purely sports. Because beyond what happens on the track, what is truly at stake is the legacy of one of the greatest champions that this sport has known. And that legacy, right now, is at a crossroads that few dare to analyze out loud. Hamilton did not sign with Ferrari only for a millionaire contract. He did it for something bigger. He did it for symbolism, for the story, for the possibility of closing his career with a feat worthy of legend, return to the Scuderia his lost splendor. There was an epic narrative in that movement, a kind of poetic justice that suggested that the last big chapter of his career could be written with red ink in Maranello as Lauda or Schumacher did. But modern Formula One does not work with Hollywood scripts. And what began as a brilliant promise is beginning to show cracks that could have a very high cost. Every time Hamilton goes on track and the result does not accompany, the emotional weight not only falls on it. It also falls to all those who believed that their arrival to Ferrari would mean an immediate transformation. And it is precisely that burden, that invisible but constant pressure, which begins to erode the moral of a pilot accustomed to winning. Because this is not another year in his career. This is probably the year where your last real opportunity is played to add an 8th title. And if that opportunity is diluted between strategic errors, technical problems and adaptation difficulties, it will be inevitable to ask if this was the correct movement. In addition, we must not forget the media and symbolic context. Hamilton is now Ferrari's visible face. Each failure is not only yours, it becomes an amplified failure of the entire project. And unlike his stage in Mercedes, where he had a structure built around him for years, in Ferrari he is still in the integration phase. That makes it a much more exposed target. There is no protection network. There is no time to build from patience. Each race without result feeds external doubts, but above all, it can turn on the inmates. And this is where the real conflict enters. Because unlike his early years, Hamilton no longer runs for trophies. Run by meaning. Run by closing a cycle. Run to show that its greatness transcends the car that pilots. That can win again even in hostile circumstances. But that narrative, powerful and loaded with emotion, needs results. And those results are not coming. At least not yet. This situation also tensions its relationship with the team. Because while he fights to adapt, Ferrari must make technical decisions that benefit him, without compromising the performance of his other pilot, Charles Leclerc. And that creates a delicate dynamic. To what extent is Ferrari willing to modify his technical philosophy by a single pilot, even if that pilot is Lewis Hamilton? And to what extent can Hamilton maintain their motivation intact if he feels that the team is not moving at its pace? These questions still have no answer. But what is clear is that the margin of error narrows with each grand prize. What is disputed here is the final narrative of the most statistically successful pilot in the history of this sport. Is this stage in Ferrari the final test that will consolidate Hamilton as the most complete pilot of all time, capable of winning even in the most complex environment? Or will it be, on the contrary, the chapter where it is demonstrated that not even the largest talent can reverse the deep inertia of a team loaded with history but also of contradictions? So the great question that is open is, Hamilton and Ferrari will synchronize their paths before time play against them? Or are we witnessing, without knowing it, the slow and silent fall of a legend?